What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with a prop preview for this week's Shriners Children's Open. Gonna go through what you need to know before going out there and entering any prop slips to go out there, have yourself a round one, and give yourself a research process for rounds 2 through 4 as well. So gonna start it off with a look at some of the stats at TPC Summerlin, which is of course the course for this week. And then afterwards, take a look at the weather and some of the props over there on Underdog and on Prize Picks that you might want to keep an eye on for Thursday's action to go out there and have yourself a solid start to the week. So first off, with a look at the golf course, which is one of the easier tracks that we have on all of the PGA Tour. In fact, if you take a look at the scoring average over the last 3 or 4 years, it's almost always been at least a stroke and a half under par, sometimes even better than 2 under like we saw last year. So when you take a look at it round by round over here on Data Golf, you can see we had rounds of 1.6 under par, just 1.1 under par in round 2. We'll talk about that. But over the weekend, scoring averages of minus 3.1 and also just under 3 under par. So you can see it's really gettable, right, when conditions are for the taking. And here in round 2 last year, it was a little bit windier than what we're used to seeing. And outside of the occasional wind gusts that'll come through from time to time, out there in Las Vegas, there's not much that's going to combat these players. So if we look in 2022, it played pretty easy all 4 rounds. You can see right around a 2 under par scoring average. Back in 2021, it was the same story. In fact, even easier. Played 2.5 under par. But once again, look at round 4, right? Only played 0.7 under par. That was when it was exceptionally windy out there. So something worth noting when we take a look at the forecast here in a second is that the wind can impact play. Something to note, even when it's been a little bit windy out there, they're still making a bunch of birdies. So out here in 2021, round 4, they still made 4.14 birdies per round. And last year in round 2, when it played slightly more difficult, right, 1.1 under par, they made 0.02 birdies less per round than your average over the last 5 years. So even when it gets a little bit blustery out there, it doesn't seem like the players are affected much when it comes to making all of those birdies, right, putting up that scoring. It's more so with the bogeys, right, missing greens, adding in a bogey or two, maybe a double out there in your round. That's why you see the difference in the scoring averages. So with all that in mind, right, hopping over to the weather forecast, it's pretty important to note that it looks pretty windy early, right? If we take a look at the forecast for Thursday here, in terms of your sustained winds, also your wind gusts are much higher in the morning hours than in the afternoon. If we take a look at this NEM forecast, which I would say is the second most accurate about this time out, it's also calling for slightly higher winds in the morning than the afternoon. So if you're going to take a look at past year's averages, I think the morning wave may actually be slightly harder than what we have in the afternoon, which is kind of backwards from what you'd expect. For most slates, the morning plays easier than the afternoon wave, both because of lower winds and more receptive greens. Unfortunately for that wave tomorrow, they're not going to have that same kind of edge, right? They're going to be playing in higher winds. They will have the more receptive greens, but that won't be enough to combat the fact that they're playing in harder conditions in terms of the weather. So just something to point out, we might be looking at a few fades for the morning hours, especially when it comes to bogeys, right? I'll remind you, we didn't see a huge impact on the scoring when it came to birdies. It was more so about people making more bogeys when you had those windy conditions. So with that being said, over there on Underdog, a few props that you might want to keep an eye on. And we'll talk even more extensively about some of the more specialized categories here in a few minutes, like fairways and greens and stuff like that. But in terms of your normal scoring props on Underdog, I like this over on Nikolai Hogard. He's at 1.5 bogeys and is one of those early tee times, right? I know it says 11:29 a.m. That's over here on the East Coast. That is going to be an 8:29 a.m. local time tee time. So he's going off early, playing in some of the windier conditions that you could see on the forecast there. And in general, Nikolai Hogard, not known as a bogey avoider, even over there on the DP World Tour when he is one of the top 3 players on that circuit, he's outside the top 65 on tour and bogey avoidance. Furthermore, he's a player that's much more known for going out there making 6-7 birdies around. So knowing that there's going to be a bogey average of at least 2 bogeys tomorrow, in fact, taking a look at some of the harder rounds over the last 3-4 years, when it's been a little bit windy, the bogey average has been between 2.5 and 3.5 bogeys per round. So even if Hogard went out there and made 2 bogeys, right, which would be significantly better than the field average, right, when it comes to bogey average, he would still go over for us, right? So just, I think a prop that brings plenty of value to the table, especially considering that Nicolai Højgaard on an easier tour, right, DP World Tour, nowhere near the same level as the PGA Tour, is still outside the top 65 on that tour when it comes to bogey avoidance. So when he gets the sample size to qualify for the PGA Tour stats, I don't think he's going to rank very well in that category either. Next up, we've got Luke List over birdies. So on the flip side of the AM wave being a little bit windy, the PM wave looks pretty divine, right? From about noon onwards, the wind gust and the sustained winds drop about 5-6 miles an hour. While it's not going to be perfect conditions, right, it's not going to play a whole, 2 strokes harder, right? Maybe it plays like a stroke and a half under par. My guess would be that it plays an entire 2 strokes under par, which means that we're going to have some overs on birdies, potentially even some unders on strokes that I think are going to be really attractive in the PM wave. So Luke List, somebody that I'm taking for overs on birdies for one of 2 reasons. First off, a high birdie percentage player to begin with, one of the more aggressive players on tour, but also coming in off a win, has been putting his lights out, right? So not even just this event, where he went out there, led the field last week in shots gained putting. Before that, he's gained 3 of his last 4 events, which for Luke List, if you've been following golf the last few years, that is completely unheard of. I mean, literally the worst putter on the PGA Tour. We're looking at a completely different situation than Lucas Glover, but I'm getting a lot of the same vibes, right? He's not having the same kind of equipment change here with Luke List. It's much more about the fundamentals, but whatever he found is working, right? And that is not just reflected with the eye test, but you've seen it with the stats for Luke List the last 3 or 4 starts. So I like the fact that he has that putter. Hopefully that continues into this week. But even outside of that, is in the ideal wave, right? Projected just above the field average when it comes to birdies. May actually be projected below the field average right there in the PM wave, and is a player that's a top 10 birdie maker in this field. So I like the stats for the longer term stuff, right? Looking at birdie or better percentage. But when you consider the fact that he's coming in on such a hot stretch of putting form, right? You'd have a hard time avoiding Luke List. I mean, the guy hits the ball to 5-6 feet all day. The tilting thing is that he normally doesn't make all of those putts, but for whatever reason, over the last month, they've started to drop, and is why he's getting attention there for birdies or better. And then the last prop we're taking here is another PM guy, and it's going to be for an under on strokes. So once again, right, playing in the better conditions, it's Tom Hoge at 68.5 strokes. Over there on FanDuel, I believe on Caesars, he's also at 67.5 strokes. So he's an entire stroke lower. He's playing in the perfect conditions, and last week looked pretty sharp, right? A lot of the broadcasters were talking about Hoge going on vacations, but playing golf at least once or twice every single day. There's one of the broadcasters who I guess was talking to Hoge right over the little break there at the playoffs, and was saying that he was over in Mexico playing golf literally 2-3 times a day and playing for money against legit players. So if you're looking for somebody that is sharp, that is still hitting the ball and striping it just like he was last year, Tom Hoge's your guy, right? He took no days off. He's an absolute grinder out there, and even on vacation with his family was going out there and working on his game. And frankly, I love that, right? When I know a player is going to be sharp, right, didn't take time off. Nicolai Højgaard, right, might have been drinking a little bit of beer after that Ryder Cup win. Not Tom Hoge. That guy's out there grinding, whether it's on the golf course or at the craps tables. My boy Tom Hoge is putting in that work. So I love that for him. I like the fact that he's got the perfect tee time. And once again, kind of like Luke List, is top 10 in the category, right? If you look at scoring average for last year, Tom Hoge is actually a top 5 player in the field in that category, which is once again just another piece of value you can attack. We're going over to Prize Picks, which doesn't have a board up. I want to look at some of the more advanced stats here. So we'll bring up the advanced stat tab and take a look at some of the field averages. So first and foremost, the driving accuracy right around 9 fairways per round. So it'll go up to like 9.1, 9.2 occasionally, sometimes down to like 8.7, 8.8 fairways per round. But we could pretty much expect right around that 9 mark every single year. So over there on Prize Picks, if we get an elite tier accuracy guy priced at 9 or 9.5 fairways, I'll for sure be considering that over. Over here for greens regulation, the average usually hovers right around 13 greens per round. So once again, if we get an elite tier player at 13 or 13 and a half greens in regulation, I'm going to definitely consider their over. And just for the sake of round one, right, you can use that analysis for pretty much any round at this event. You want to make sure we're targeting the PM guys for round one, right? Whether it's for off the tee or for greens, having the lower wins is going to be extremely helpful, which is a little counterintuitive than most slates, right? Typically we want AM guys when we're looking for greens regulation, as they can go out there and throw those darts. It's just a little bit different when you have those 15 to 25 mile an hour winds that they're calling for in the morning hours. So just something to consider there. Again, no Prize Picks board as of right now, but there's a good chance that we see some value over there for strokes and for birdie. So if we're getting some, some of these guys that are at 68 strokes over here in Underdog that are posted at 68 and a half, well, I'm heavily going to have to consider them for unders. I mean, even some of the AM guys, right, that are playing in harder conditions, there's a good chance that Prize Picks accounts for that, right, and post somebody, let's see, like an Eric Cole, maybe at 68 and a half or maybe even 69 strokes, and we might have to consider an under at that point, right? I know it's harder conditions, but now we're getting a much easier projection to hit, and kind of changes the situation a little bit. So for all my takes this week, for every prop that I'm taking, check out the Patreon page. There's a link down below. You guys know the deal at this point, right? I give you guys some of the analysis here on YouTube, and for the rest of it, you guys know where to check it out. I post all my slips on there, all the different types of analysis that I'm running. There's a DFS package you can go with. There's a prop package if you're only looking for the props that I'm posting, and I'm always posting stuff for Underdog, Prize Picks over there. So if you've been wondering, all of my exposure, right, how you can go out there and tail all of my slips, that's how you can go out there and do so. So check it out down below, and that's where we're going to have the rest of the analysis for this week. But until next time, guys, I appreciate all the support here on the channel. Go ahead and smash the like button on the way out of here. We will have streams throughout the weekend for rounds 2 through 4, so make sure to check those out for all of the action over the weekend. We're going over DFS there, all the different prop content, just reacting to some of the weather and how to attack each day of the event. So looking forward to it. Best of luck out there with those slips, and let's go out there and have ourselves a Thursday.